Hello, hello. It looks like we're... looks like we're live. Alrighty. Welcome back to Fanfic Friday. I am eating dinner, and then we'll get started. Hey, Alexis! YouTube actually notified me, lol. Oh, sometimes a broken clock is right, you know. Hey, Sky Center. I meant to start this earlier today, but after working all morning, I decided I deserve a little nap, and then I overslept. Oops. Well, how is everyone today? I'm doing pretty good. Little groggy. Could use some coffee. Naps are pretty awesome. It's true. But you know that, like, brain thing that your body has where when you're asleep, all it wants is to sleep more? And then when you're really awake, you're like, wait, no, why did you sabotage yourself, brain? I turned my alarm off, and I slept like another 30 minutes I didn't intend to. Oh well. Uh-oh, my phone's ringing. It's probably my mother, about to ask me to walk the dog. So, hello, Silent Konami. While we wait for folks to show up for the stream, I guess I will go walk the dog, maybe get a cup of coffee, and maybe by then we'll have a nice little group and we'll get started. Let me know in the chat how the music sounds, if it's too loud, too quiet, what have you. Be right back. Hello! Sorry about that wait. My mom is sick, so I was making her some tea and stuff before I got settled up here. Whew. Hello, everybody joining us. Lobsel, E.T., Marlon, Delvin, thank you for joining us. And welcome back to Final Hell. Let's see, we stopped last week with the bit where Sid was being chased by horrible monsters, and his whole crew, basically, he'd just seen a bunch of folks die, which was fun. And he was saved by a mysterious stranger, who we obviously don't know who that is. And Cloud had just arrived at the mansion following Aerith's ghost to discover what is happening to him and why. So, we're going to read 2 more chapters today, and maybe we'll get some answers. Alright, here we go. Fanfic Friday. Chapter 4. Monsters in the Basement. Once again, we have a quote, and this one I had to Google to remember what it was from. The quote is, "If only I had a hand grenade," which is from a note in Silent Hill 3 about the monsters in the sewers. Oh, that's fun. Oh man, at least it's actually a Silent Hill quote. That's a start, you know? It's better than nothing. Smoke filled his nostrils as soon as Cloud walked inside the main hall. Coughing, the blonde squinted his eyes, trying to see in the dark. It was a mess, a ruined and decrepit place, like a graveyard, and Cloud felt like a trespasser. But there was no avoiding it. He had to keep going. The front hall was ash-filled with broken floorboards and a chandelier that was hanging on its last chain. It had seen its final days many years before, even earlier than the fire had been. Nervous, Cloud avoided walking under the chandelier and stepped quickly up the stairs. Good instincts! To the left or right? He chose right, dashing up the next flight into a hallway. The first door he tried wouldn't open. The lock was broken. The next room was the same, but the third on the right gave results. With a creak, he opened the door and stepped into a small office. In the center of the room was a desk, likely once owned by a Shinra executive during the times of the hospital. So all of a sudden, during the times of the hospital, the mansion was a hospital at one point, and we're just kind of glossing over that. Cloud stepped behind the burnt mahogany, surprised to see some documents had survived. Despite being aged greatly, he was able to read a bit. New Turk deployment this week. 2 novices and a reassignment for a junior. Professor Gast requested. Seems to think this new project is of a relevance and later level of danger requiring careful guidance. His associates seem unsure. The rest of the page was blood-covered, and the stench burned his nose. Frowning, Cloud left the desk with an irritated mutter. He approached the bookshelf on the left wall. Dust covered the bindings, which he gently wiped away with a finger. Each one was a scientific text of some kind. His eyes wandered. Huh. He blinked and leaned back. A couple are missing. There were 3 blank spots on the shelves. 1 on the second to bottom row, 1 on the middle, and 1 on the far left. Wonder what happened to them. Hey, Jeff. Have y'all folks noticed quite yet that I am quite literally writing this fanfic in the style of a Silent Hill game? Quite literally, it walks through some puzzle solving and exploration, and it's very much written like I was imagining a level of the Silent Hill game, which I find really fascinating, because it's not often that fanfic tries to quite literally emulate the style of a game. You know, like they're recreating the fictional world, but not the gameplay style. So that's fun. There was really nothing else to do in the room, so Cloud kept exploring. The next door on the hall was locked, but the room at the very end opened. It was one of the old laboratory rooms, the ones they would take injured soldiers to for extended treatment. Cloud had known many a man who had spent months in this chamber. Somber, he glanced at the empty beds, black and tinged with reds and yellows. "Why is this all still here?" he muttered. Shaking his head, he sauntered to the back of the room. Something caught his eye on the right. He spun on his heel. Was that? Blinking, he moved towards the last bed and leaned to look under it. There was something there. Reaching back, he grasped for it when he felt a slight pinch. Ow! He flinched and frowned when he saw a bit of blood on his index finger, but he still tried again, determined, and this time managed to extract a shiny object from under the bed. A scalpel. Cloud frowned. Wasn't this the care ward? They kept patients there. They wouldn't have performed surgery here. Confused, he examined the worn tool and after a moment's hesitation, pocketed it. Just before he was going to leave the room, Cloud opened the door and felt it hit something. He glanced down and was again surprised. One of the books. He knelt and picked it up, turned it about in his hands. Even more surprising, it was a diary. When Cloud tried to open it, the blood it was soaked in kept it glued shut. But a weak page near the front fell out of the binding. Cloud picked it up. 2 more recruits failed to pass compatibility test. Rising need for soldiers has led to a need for more compatible DNA. Research required. On a different line it read, "Professor Gast requires more time that we do not have. A replacement has been sought." Gast. The paper on the desk had mentioned somebody by that name, Cloud thought as he retraced his steps to the library. Once inside, he examined the bookshelf. Wonder where this goes. He glanced at the book again. Hojo's log 23. There were more of the logs on the shelf. Cloud found the empty spot between 22 and 24 and filled it. With that hall thoroughly explored, Cloud returned to the main stairs and entered the far left hall. The first door on this hall opened, but inside was just an old bathroom. I guess if that's... should be this order. Nope. No, I guess not. Okay. I got it confused for a minute because of the reference to a bathroom, but I guess he goes into 2 different bathrooms? Okay. The first door opened as well, to another office. There were more documents on the desk, notes about patients, memos about meetings. One thing caught Cloud's eye. A key. He pocketed it. The next door was jammed shut. Cloud then approached a door with a blood-stained doorknob that sent an eerie chill down his spine. After a short period of hesitation, he opened it. The room was small, with a hospital bed in the center. Cloud thought of the cold metal in his pocket. This is definitely where they did surgery. Cloud grimaced at the metallic tools, similar to the scalpel, that lined the table nearby. As he explored, Cloud noticed something about the bed. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch it. Restraints? Frowning, the man saw the leather straps, blood-soaked, and grimaced at the implications. Surely the patients were unconscious. Suddenly, Cloud felt his feet lose traction, slipping on something on the cold ground, and as he struggled to keep his balance, fell forward on his chest. Shit! Cursing, Cloud winced, eyes catching sight of something metal. The puddle he'd fallen into was flowing towards a vent. Cloud's eyes widened. The key had fallen out of his pocket and was heading for the vent. Fuck! Just barely, his fingers missed grabbing it, and down it went. The man slammed his fist against the ground. It took him a moment, but he stood, grimacing at the sight of blood coating his shirt and part of his jacket. The substance covered the floor. Stomach churning, the man examined the walls, then turned and left. Down the hall he went, past another door, up a staircase. There was a window to his left, halfway open. Cloud stuck his head out and glanced around, then down. The sight of light fluttering out from another open window below caught his eye. Is there someone there? He wondered. He shrugged and kept going up the stairs. 3 doors were in the hallway, floor creaking as he walked. Cloud tried the first. It opened and revealed a bathroom. It looked relatively normal, other than being extremely dirty and dingy. There was blood here as well, mostly in the far back corner at the last stall. Cloud moved toward it nervously, slightly curious. He knocked twice. Hello? Nothing happened. Cloud shrugged and turned to go. Tap, tap, tap. The man spun around. Shocked, he blinked and almost stepped back to the stall. At the last moment, he decided against it. I don't want to know. When he turned to go, another noise broke the silence. Creak. bones trembling. His bones are trembling? Why are his bones trembling? Hello, Silent Leon. Am I going to be playing something later? Is this going to be the only stream tonight? I am probably going to be playing something. I'm arguing with myself over what it will be, but it'll be something. Horror-related, probably. Bones trembling. The man glanced back. The door had opened. Slowly, nervously, Cloud stepped towards it. It was just a normal, albeit very nasty and in need of a good cleaning, bathroom, but there was something. Cloud stepped into the stall and saw a soggy book in the toilet. This is sickening, he grumbled, removing the tome slowly. Half of the pages had disintegrated, the ink on the others totally ruined. Still, he took it, determined to place it where it belonged. Somehow, it felt right to do so. The next door was jammed, but the last opened. Inside was a large attic space. Crates and boxes of paperwork and files filled the room. As he walked, Cloud swiped at cobwebs and ducked under pieces of the roof that had caved in. It was terribly musty. Frowning, Cloud walked to a back corner, where a large musical instrument case stood, next to a safe. The blonde kneeled by it, looking it over. It was locked tight, and he had no idea what the code was. He stood again. Both halls had been thoroughly searched. Cloud returned to the library, ruined book in hand, to place it back on the shelf. Then he stepped back. 2 are back on the shelf, but where's the third, he wondered. His eyes scanned the shelves, and with a gasp, it came to him. It was already on the shelf. Someone had placed it on its side above other books. Cloud took it down and examined the cover. Holy, this was not a log kept by the man Hojo. This was Sephiroth's log 16. He had a diary? Cloud stared at the book for a moment, heart beating wildly. But then the curiosity in his eyes dimmed to a darker, angrier hue. The man shoved the book back onto its place on the shelf and turned away from the damned thing. Something rumbled. Spinning around, the blonde's mouth dropped open as he watched the bookshelf recede into the wall, and then disappear behind another bookshelf. Behind it was revealed a stairwell, pitch black, leading down far into the darkness. Cloud frowned, surprised. It was almost too dark to see. As his feet moved towards the stairs, Cloud glanced back one last time. Yet even as he doubted, the man heard it. Maybe his mind only produced it, or maybe he really had heard distant laughing. Either way, his resolve was cemented, and with hard eyes he descended into darkness. Hey, Diana! No, there's no smut in this story. You've missed Cloud playing Silent Hill, basically. He's going to different rooms, he's finding objects that don't belong, he's putting things back in their place. Literally, I'm not writing a story, I'm writing gameplay, which is just fascinating to me. Like, I really was imagining myself creating a video game scenario, which makes sense considering at one point with my friends I tried to turn this into a movie, and in a movie setting I could see like exploring the town and trying kind of like the film does like a little of this with the finding the pictures and the keys and stuff, but in a fiction it just feels weird to read this kind of style of storytelling. It's very strange. I wonder if anybody else has written Silent Hill gameplay. Oh boy. I hope you appreciate the work I did on Hojo's bookshelf. I had a lot of fun with that. That one took me a little while. I really think it's true to life. When Sid next awoke, he was in total darkness. Is it possible to die and go to hell twice? He wondered vaguely, head reeling in pain. He felt slightly torn apart. Slightly. As if dogs had been pulling on his limbs with their teeth, and he was woozy from blood loss. But he wasn't bleeding anymore, and he felt somewhat whole. His leg burned. The mechanic was lying down on something slightly cold, in complete darkness. Squinting, he tried to see anything at all and was unable. Sid lifted a hand and hit wood with a thunk. Shit! The man flinched as if he'd been hit, arms flying up. Thunk! Slunk! Slightly panicky, the man began pounding his fists against the wood. Fucking hell! He added his feet to the mix, shaking the box with his movements. Something cracked, and after a little more beating, Sid managed to shove the lid off. He scampered out of the coffin, visibly shaken, face pale. Fuck on a fucktart! What is fuck on a fucktart? Oh, good lord. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I should have done that one again, shouldn't I? Oh, yeah, that should be right there before he gets out of the coffin. The captain was in a small, dimly lit room filled with rows of coffins. There were at least 6 or 7 tossed haphazardly around the room, nailed shut. He'd been lying in one just like them. What had happened? He'd been in the Reaper's arms, about to be dead as oil fuel when Mako was discovered. What line is that? He'd been in the Reaper's arms, about to be as dead as oil fuel when Mako was discovered. Then what? There was... Frowning, Sid tried to remember how he'd survived the encounter with the hellish creature. Fucking hell. Frustrated, Sid vented his rage on the coffin that had housed him, kicking it over. It rolled and hit another larger coffin in the center of the room. For the first time, Sid noticed this coffin. It was much larger than the others, as if it had been built for a man of 6 or 7 feet. It was black, unlike the ordinary brown wooden ones around it. Slightly nervous, Sid moved towards it. He knelt by the thing, examining it, when he noticed words on the front. Sid read half of them before declaring fucking mumbo-jumbo and standing back up. When he did, the box moved. The mechanic cursed loudly and jumped back, hands curling into fists. What would it be this time? A zombie? A demon? Shara's family ready to make him pay? Why would her family be jumping out of a coffin? Why would... Sid wasn't sure which sounded most unappealing. The cover slid back slowly and silently. Sid stayed still, forcing himself not to move, only to watch as something rose out of the darkness. To his surprise, it was nothing he thought it would be. It was a man. He was about the height of the coffin, a long, thin form shrouded in a torn red cloak. From behind messy jet black hair, crimson eyes blazed, framed by a feminine face. Feminine face. Oh yes, very descriptive. Sid watched in fear, still nervous from before, half his body telling him to run, the other to fight. The stranger stood only a foot from him, stoic and silent as Sid waited, unsure of what to do. Just as the man opened his mouth and started to speak, Sid decided, "What are you?" The mechanic punched him. Ah, boy, this story does have twists and turns. It's about to have some more twists and turns. This next part has problems. Oh, boy. The trip across the sea took much too long. Tifa was about to jump over the side and swim to the western continent, and she might have if Shalua hadn't held her back. As it was, the woman was pacing the deck even as the ship docked. She was ready to leave already. "You know Nibelheim's another 2 hours away," Shalua told her, trying to calm her down. "Weren't you the one saying we had to get to Cloud before he went into the town?" Tifa spat. "What if we're too late? What if he's there already?" The woman frowned at the hidden desperation in Tifa's voice, having felt it many times herself. "Then we'll have to brave the town." The younger woman blinked. As Shalua turned away, sighing heavily, Tifa took in the many wounds on the elder's body, which she'd only hardly noticed before. "You've tried getting into that town before, haven't you?" the brunette murmured. A few crewmen approached the woman, announcing their car had been unloaded from the cargo hold. Neither heard him. Shalua haltingly lifted her eyes, and Tifa noticed Shalua haltingly lifted her eyes, and Tifa noticed how one seemed to be faded, almost injured. A very bad way of saying she's blind in one eye? Did not write that very well. There was fear in those eyes. Soul-numbing, mind-altering fear. The kind of absolute terror one finds in death. We're having a kitty bathroom break. I don't know why Gandalf has to do this, but he has to make noise while he pees. He has to scratch the wall while he pees. I don't know why. It comforts him, I guess. Just... Yeah, she's blind in one eye, which I'm pretty sure is canonical to Dirge of Cerberus. I don't remember what the story was in the original game, but she's missing half an arm, she has an eye that's blind, she has a bunch of scars, and I guess I implied in this story that they were from trying to go into Silent Hill to find her sister, and in the other one, probably something similar, because she was trying to find her sister. If I remember right, I'm pretty sure Shalua dies. I don't remember. I need to replay Dirge of Cerberus. Before the remake comes out, we will do that. Take your time, buddy. It's okay. It's so funny. Okay, you all done making weird noise? Come here. Candy, come here. He says, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to come say hello. I am embarrassed. All right. Tifa felt her resolve crumble, her anger fade to puzzlement as she wondered what could create such horror and revulsion. I can't give up, Shalua whispered. If Cloud's in there, I'll follow him. Tifa heard her strong voice and the slight tremble underneath it. Then, surprised at her own strength in the face of such fear, she nodded. I'll follow him too, she murmured. I'm all he's got left. What she left unsaid was what was left for her. What she left unsaid was what was left for her. That makes no sense. Oh, my child self. Shalua managed to make the 2-hour trip to Nibelheim in a record 1 hour 15 minutes. That's actually a reference. My brother did that. We traveled to an area near here, the Wilmington White Lake area. We traveled there quite a lot because our family lived there. We'd go a couple times a year. And one time my brother cut the 2-hour trip to 1 hour and 15 minutes by going way too fast. She would have made it sooner if the blue lights hadn't flashed and the siren blared behind them, signaling them to pull over. Wonderful, Shalua groaned. She punched the wheel while Tifa merely rolled her eyes. It's not like you were going 90 miles, the woman muttered. Shalua pointedly ignored her as the officer walked to the window. Window rolled down. Shalua leaned over towards the tall, dark-skinned man. What can I do you for? The brunette next to her almost gagged. How obvious can you be? She rolled her eyes again. Then Tifa did a double take, glancing wide-eyed at the window. The cop had the same surprised face. Tifa? The deep-voiced man spat. It was all she could do not to groan. Of all the cops to catch us. Hi, Barrett, she mumbled, trying desperately to sink into the leather seat. So let's take a moment and consider this. In the there's a few things. For one, in this alternate universe, Barrett is a cop. Presumably, I guess Shinra does, if they still control the world. Like, that means he works for Shinra, unless I was imagining that Shinra's not in control of the police or something. But still, so he's a cop. In the previous chapters, Tifa called him, asking him to babysit Denzel, and now he's not where's Denzel? Who has Denzel if Barrett's here doing his job? And then also, if he lives in Midgar where they do, why is he on the western continent that they just crossed an ocean to get to? There's so many issues here. What the hell are you doing speeding around in the middle of nowhere? Barrett roared, right in Shalua's face, though the woman hardly winced. What are you doing patrolling around here? Tifa countered, confused as to why her friend was so far away from Corel. Okay. So, I guess he didn't live in Midgar. He lives in Corel. So was he gonna fly and get Denzel? Where's Denzel right now? The anger in his mood didn't fade, but he let out a grunt. There's not a road here that don't have a cop on it for miles. Search and rescue mission, he explained, standing up straight and pointing to the woods behind him. An airship from Midgard went missing around here. Went missing? Shalua muttered, a frown set into her face. The cop cursed. Just fucking disappeared off radar. No crash site, nothing. We ain't found shit. That's a Mel Brooks reference right there. Oh man, there's a moment in Mel Brooks's Star Wars comedy Spaceballs where the bad guys are looking for someone and they're told to comb the desert, and the joke is that they have giant combs and they're combing the desert. And the last duo, when their boss asks them, "Have you found anything?" The joke is it's switched from combs to a pick, and now it's a black guy instead of the white stormtrooper, and the black guy goes, "We ain't found shit!" Because they're combing the desert. If you haven't seen Spaceballs, you need to watch Spaceballs. It's great. That man is hilarious. But it is definitely a Spaceballs reference. I'm certain. As Barrett spoke, facing the foggy woods, he didn't notice the two women behind him, wide-eyed, turning to look at one another. Tifa seemed most confused, but Shalua's eyes narrowed as she bit her lip and gripped the steering wheel tight. "But that's not what matters right now," Barrett muttered, turning back to them. "What the hell were you doing going 90 down the road?" The man crossed his arms, glaring intimidatingly. "Looking for someone," Shalua explained. "It's important, and I'm afraid we're in a hurry." "Where to?" the cop glowered, and Shalua glared back just as hard. "Town called Nibelheim. Ever heard of it?" Barrett's angry facade melted into shock. He turned towards Tifa. "What do you want with that hellhole?" "Cloud's gone there," Tifa told him, voice trembling slightly. "I'm going after him." Sneering, he turned his eyes on Shalua. "And you?" "I'm just along for the ride," she smirked at his disapproving gaze. "Well, I'm afraid you two will have to come with me," the man ordered. "I can't take you to the precinct, but I'll take you to the search site for now. Then maybe you," he pointed at Tifa, "can explain why the hell I'm picking Denzel up from the airport tomorrow morning while you're here joyriding." So, I guess he is... So, is Denzel alone tonight? And he's getting in from the airport in the morning. So many problems. The mother felt her heart clench. "This is serious. I didn't just give Denzel to you to go waste time." "Right." The cop shook his head and stormed back towards his cruiser. "Just follow me." As he stalked off, Tifa collapsed against the chair and groaned. The other woman rolled up her window and started the car back up. "Don't worry," Shalua said, still smirking. The tired woman turned to glare at her. "Why not?" she asked. Shalua turned and smiled. "I have a hunch he's taking us in the right direction." Oh, man. Halfway down the infernal, rickety staircase, which twisted and curved away into the darkness, Cloud realized he might have made a mistake. The stairwell lacked a railing protecting him from falling. Pitch black, thick, musty air was choking him, and sight was nigh on impossible. The blonde was ready to curse his lack of foresight when the worst happened. Cloud took a step and felt his foot fly out from under him, body crashing down onto the faulty steps. The entire staircase shook frighteningly, dust flying into the air as Cloud's head throbbed. Wincing, the man's heart skipped a beat as he extended his hand and realized how close he'd come to careening off those stairs. Click, click. The man blinked. Sitting up, he tried looking for whatever was making the noise and resorted to feeling for it. Eventually, his sore palms found something round and smooth nudged between two floorboards. It felt slightly warm and familiar. A smile came to his face, and after a bit of concentration, gentle effervescence lit up the steps. What a highfalutin way to say the room lit up. Gentle effervescence. Gentle effervescence. God. Cloud laughed when he saw the red materia in his hand. Red materia was usually used to cast fire, but soldiers were taught to control their magic and the flow of it. A good soldier could make a red materia glow like a lamp for hours at a time. "Thank Shiva for small mercies," he muttered, standing up slowly with a hand on the wall. The rest of the journey passed by uneventfully. When his feet hit dirt, Cloud heaved a shaky sigh of relief and turned to look around. Despite the materia's shimmering light, Cloud couldn't see much. Looking up, though, and seeing how many stars there were almost made him... Stairs! How many stars there were! I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. Almost made him sick. The snaking monster of a stairwell disappeared into shadow 10 flights above him. Frowning, Cloud tried to pierce the dark in front of him with his eyes. He could see a tall, long hallway, but the length and dim light kept him from seeing what was beyond. Nerves choked him. No going back. He strode, albeit stiffly, and slowly towards the passageway. The first door he came to opened, revealing a messy office inside. It must have at one time been shared by many. 4 cubicles split the room, each with a blood-soaked desk. Cloud moved the light over each, avoiding looking at family photos and personal belongings. He examined documents. Most he saw were unimportant, though he did see a newspaper spread out on a desk, destroyed by time and soaked in something. One of the articles was circled. Nibelheim doctor found dead. Investigation underway. With a frown, Cloud moved away to the next desk. He left the room soon after. Through the dank hall he kept exploring, searching room after room. He found no other clues or useful items, and eventually found himself at a dead end. An angry growl echoed round. Damn it! The blonde kicked the dirt. The door in front of him required a key that was likely the one that had fallen out of his pocket earlier. Fuming, Cloud turned to go and almost didn't notice the last door in the hall. Something about it was foreboding. Cloud brushed his hands over the drying wood, glanced at the doorknob. The door was chained shut, a heavy padlock on the chains. He'd have to have a key for this door, too. A wrinkle formed on his brow as he thought back, trying to come up with something. How to move forward? There had to be a way. This door can't be locked up so tight for no reason, Cloud murmured. There must be something inside. Resolved to open it, Cloud turned and left the hall, prepared to make the long trek back up the stairs. Perhaps he'd missed something. Just as his foot set down upon the bottom stair, something in the air changed. Something flipped, like a coin spitting midair, finally hitting the ground new side up. The small light in Cloud's hand allowed him to see very little, and then it went out. Cloud flinched. What? He fell silent at the noise, the distant rumble, the sullen creeping, like old wallpaper being gently torn down. The cold, dank air became hot, burning hot, like the devil's breath, and the rooms around him seemed suddenly alive. Cloud sped up the stairs despite his lack of sight, careening blindly towards the distant upper floors. He had to get out. He had to get out. After a short 20-minute drive through the woods, Barrett led the 2 women to a parking lot, where at least 20 police cars were parked. Dogs on leashes barked wildly. White lights flashed in the twilight. It was slightly surreal, watching from behind the dingy window as blue and white light flared all around and shouting echoed. It was even beginning to drizzle a little over the frantic search teams. Hey, Tifa snapped out of her thoughts. Shalua had a hand on her shoulder. When the brunette turned to her, the younger nodded towards the far corner. Tifa turned to see a long, sloping hill heading up. That's Mount Nibel, Tifa murmured, heart fluttering in her chest. Nibelheim's on the other side. I know, the driver murmured. If this cop hadn't found us, we'd be there by now. She sighed and rubbed her forehead. Still, this airship sounds suspicious. Perhaps we should check it out. Tifa wasn't really paying attention, too busy thinking and staring at the magnificent white peak miles ahead of them. Are you already there, Cloud? Breath fogging the window, she placed a hand there and leaned her forehead against it. What are you thinking? What in the world are you looking for? Eventually, Barrett parked in one space and Shalua parked next to him. Tifa got out of the car, legs numb from the long drive, hands tingling in anticipation of something. You know how when your hands tingle in anticipation? That's just weird. That's weird. As they approached a large makeshift tent, another cop hurried over, one Tifa recognized. Hey! The short girl chirped, black hair cut into a bob. The woman was bouncy, excitedly hugging Barrett as he approached. The tall, gruff man threw her off with a blush on his face. Not on the job, Yuffie, the man spat, indignant. The girl simply grinned, hands behind her back as she backed away. Then she produced his wallet. The man's eyes went wide. What? Hey, stop messing around! He tried to snatch it back, but she jumped away, moving to Tifa. Her grinning eyes caught sight of her. Hey! The girl raced over and hugged the older woman. What are you doing here? She leaned back and smiled. I heard we were babysitting Denzel this weekend, but I didn't know you were coming. The woman gave a half smile. I didn't know either. I bumped into Barrett on the road. Sheepish, Tifa ignored Barrett's grumbling and hugged Yuffie back. It's good to see you. It really was. Yuffie's bright smile lifted her spirits. It's too bad you showed up right now. Everybody's deployed to search. There's supposed to be 300 people missing around here, but we haven't found a thing. The woman pouted childishly. So everybody's kind of standing around waiting for orders, but there's nothing to do. Not a hint in sight. During her short speech, Barrett tried sneaking up on Yuffie. At first it seemed he might succeed. Then, just at the moment he went to snatch back his wallet, the woman leapt away. She laughed as Barrett shouted and cursed loudly, jumping away and sitting on the back of his cruiser. "Get back here, brat!" Instead of obeying, Yuffie merely smirked and opened his wallet, counting the bills. Not much in here. She removed a quarter from it, spinning in the air and catching it in her hand repeatedly. Barrett stomped his heavy boot on the ground, approaching her. "Damn it, kid." Chuckling, Shalua leaned towards her partner. Quite the duo. "Are they always this loud?" she asked. Tifa didn't reply. Confused, Shalua leaned forward to get a look at her face. "Are you all right? You look pale." Tifa's eyes were clouded over, her body frozen. I don't know." Almost had a sneeze. There's the sneeze. Wasn't Yuffie a bandit? Yeah, she's a thief in the original game, and apparently in this one, she's a cop that steals people's wallets. I don't know. I don't remember if I ever went further into their background or why they're there. I don't remember it all. But yeah, she was a thief. Yuffie kept giggling at Barrett's anger, not taking him seriously, still flipping the coin. "Come on, you big lug, not my fault you're slow." Finally, the older man lunged for her, picking her up by the shoulders as she struggled and snatched the wallet from her hand. "Hey, let me go." "Tifa?" Shalua shook the woman's shoulder. "What's wrong?" The brunette heard nothing. Sweat poured down her brow, her fists clenching, her eyes trained on the coin. It had been forgotten, flipped one last time by Yuffie before she was snatched, and was now falling as if in slow motion. Tifa watched it turn and spin, light reflecting bright off one side, a dark tinge on the other. It continued to fall and fall until it hit the ground, bouncing lightly off the dusty pavement, dirt flying as the metal landed dark side up. Tifa's eyes widened further, mouth falling open, as her heart knew, just knew, something was horribly wrong. "Tifa!" Shalua shouted. The young woman wrenched herself from the other's grasp, spinning on her heel and breaking into a sprint towards Mount Nebel. "Cloud!" she shouted, shoving through police officers, racing around cars. She hardly heard the shouts of her friends behind her. Everything became a blur, and she could only see the imposing mountain ahead, the blockade that kept her from her friend, that kept Cloud hostage. Hands grabbed her shoulders and she screamed, tears pouring down her face. She struggled as if her life depended on it. And a life did. Not hers, but his. "Tifa!" Shalua screamed, catching up to Barrett as he held her down. "Calm down, what's happening? What did you see?" But the brunette only screamed and thrashed, gnashing her teeth. Her friends watched in horror as she mindlessly panicked. The coin on the ground, dark side up, totally forgotten. Yet it still laid there, a haunting feeling to it, a morbid warning. And Tifa continued to scream. End of chapter 4. So, I had it was very cinematic the way that I described this stuff. You can tell that I was kind of seeing it almost like a film or a game cutscene, and then describing the rest as gameplay. If I had had more access to the kind of programs I do now with like RPG Maker and Vegas, I wonder if I wouldn't have tried to make this into a little movie or something. Because I definitely can tell that's what I wanted. It's just I only knew how to write. Alright, where is Gandhi? He's running hid, but he was hanging out under the chair. Well, thank you, Sky Center. I'm definitely less embarrassed by this story than I was some of the others we've read. There's clearly some talent here. There's bits and pieces that are rough and probably a consequence of just lack of experience, but it's not horrible. It's not the worst thing I ever wrote. Alright, chapter 5. We all fall down. The quote for this chapter is, "At first I thought I was losing my mind, but now I know I'm not. It's not me, this whole town. It's being invaded by the other world. A world of someone's nightmarish delusions come to life. Little by little the invasion is spreading, trying to swallow up everything in darkness." So, if you hadn't caught on already, yes, it's the Otherworld. This is the Otherworld chapter. Oh God, Sinner, why do you gotta remind us about the clown kink? Let's leave that in the past. Let's forgive and forget the clown kink. And thank you, Diana. And I forgot. I did the... I forgot to change to the next one. Oh, man. So that's the Otherworld transformation. Alright, here we go. It seemed as if years had passed before Cloud finally saw the exit at the top of the stairs. Like a madman, he barreled through it before collapsing against the bookshelves. Eyes closed, chest heaving. 1,000 thoughts. Well, actually, I said 1,000 thoughts racing through his mind. 1,000 thoughts! The predominant one was, what the fuck's going on? Slowly, trembling, Cloud lifted his head, eyes open, and they widened at the sight around him. Everything was different. The office could hardly be called so anymore. Each wall was painted in blood and grime, sickening, and the floor had changed from carpet to grates, darkness surging below. There was no desk, no books, only darkness. It was a decor nightmare and Cloud's personal hell. That's a fun line. Struggling to stand, the man looked around for the door. It had moved. In front of him was a long hallway lined by tall grates, leading away into total shadow. Cloud grimaced before nervously following the path. He hefted the red materia back up and managed to make it light. His feet made the floor creak and groan with each step, and somewhere a distant moaning echoed. Cloud felt sweat pooling at the base of his neck as blistering heat rose up. He kept walking, eyes moving down, until he stopped moving in shock. Below him, through the grates, Cloud could see another floor, more grated paths crisscrossing round, and in one area, a tall, rounded structure that glowed a dull, rusted brown, like an ancient lamp. "It's just like a Mako reactor," he muttered dumbly, hardly able to believe it. How could this happen? The man moved mindlessly, unable to make sense of it. Thank you, Alexis, for appreciating the beautiful library of books that I created for Hojo. I think it's very true to his tastes. Soon, Cloud found himself in what had been another office. Now it was nightmarish. Instead of desks, there were blood-soaked gurneys, deathbeds taking the forms of limp bodies underneath. An arm too gray to be human with some kind of sore on it hung off the side of one bed. Cloud glanced away quickly to look at the strange things hanging from the ceiling. Upon closer inspection, Cloud found they were a group of mobiles of some sort. Knives? Sure enough, each rope of the mobile was tied to the edge of a sharpened object, rusted and decayed. Cloud gently prodded the edge of one, staring in utter disgust as the human flesh melded to the metal. What the hell? As the deranged mobiles turned, Cloud saw something in the reflection. He spun around to see blood, gallons of it painted upon the far wall. It formed 3 words. 3610. The man had to cover his mouth to keep from gagging. The smell was putrid, the sight abominable. He moved quickly to the door and got out. Oh boy. I can't get over the idea of mobiles. I mean, I guess I was trying to say that knives were hanging from the ceiling, but just the idea of, like, a baby mobile with little knives is just funny to me. Oh, man. Yes, Alexis, I definitely also own some of those books. I own the first 30 volumes of Naruto. That says something about me. I used to own the Prima Guide of Final Fantasy VII. Now I have the guides to Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy XII, Alan Wake, some other games. I have a various amount of guidebooks. Very weird stretch of Golden Sun. I have the guidebook to that. Alright. A blighted hall greeted him, stained and decayed, echoing with chittering and vagrant sounds. What are vagrant sounds? The sounds that vagrants make? Interesting. With his concentration faltering, the materia's light flickered, showing second-long shots of the rotting floor, cockroaches with teeth slinking about. Bile rose in his throat and he ran across the creaking boards, turning mindlessly through the halls. Muscles burning, chest heaving, horrific sights and sounds all around. Cloud tried ignoring it all. It was only a dream. "What the fuck?" he whispered. Finally, he slid to a halt, breathing heavily. Cloud pulled himself together, brushing a hand through his hair. What is all this? Pinpricks stabbed his knees as he moved slowly to the dingy wall and slumped against it. Where was he? What had happened to the mansion? This has gotta be a nightmare. I hit my head and I'm dreaming, or I'm... Exhaling, the man closed his eyes. Or I'm in hell. When he opened his eyes again, the man looked desperate. I can't be. Not yet. Sid's fist hurt from where it had collided with the other man's face. For a brief moment, he wondered if he'd made a mistake, but it was only a moment. Sid Highwind rarely second-guessed himself. Though he was a little nervous when the red cloak man he'd punched suddenly leapt up, faster than was humanly possible, and grabbed Sid around the waist. "The fuck, man? Put me down!" He was ignored as the taller man raced like a bullet across the room, rushing out the door and towards the right. There was a tall, locked door there, which Vincent quickly unlocked with a key, Sid complaining all the while. "What the hell, bastard? I can fucking walk, you..." The stranger threw the door open, tossed Sid to the ground in a heap, then spun dramatically around to shut the door behind them. He locked it from within, then backed away, hand moving to the gun beneath his cloak. Meanwhile, Sid leapt to his feet. "Don't you fucking ignore me, you damned vampiric goth brat!" He said no more. At that moment, something in the room changed. A chill entered the air, colder than any frigid night wind. "Do not fear," the other man spoke, his voice deep and commanding. "Nothing can reach us here." Sid blinked. He did feel fear, for some reason he could not explain, but he would never admit to it. I think maybe the reason is a bunch of people just died and you saw monsters and you've had a horrible day, so I feel like the fear makes sense. Where exactly was here? The man turned to examine the room he'd been tossed into. It was a library, with a desk in the center, some scientific equipment thrown about, shards of glass on the floor. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. How had he gone from being in an underground warehouse from hell to some fucker's office? Sneering, the man spun round to find out what happened, when his mouth dropped open. The room was melting. That was what it looked like. The paint was peeling off, the metal turning a sickening rust color. What had been creepy and disconcerting before became nightmarish and horrifying. The floor turned grated, nasty and grime-covered. The room relatively stayed the same, with the same layout, all the books and things disappearing. The desk remained, changing into a... Sid wasn't sure. He stared wide-eyed at it for a moment, and when he finally realized it had become a blood-soaked altar, he cursed, grimacing from the smell. It was coppery from rust and blood. "What the hell is this shit?" the mechanic shouted, clenching his fists. "It is the darkness. Agony incarnated into punishment." Sid spun round, remembering his companion. The man hadn't turned from the door, though he wasn't crouching in an attack position like before. Punishment? Stop being poetic and tell me what it is, Sid demanded, motioning to the spread of shadows, which had finally stopped. "And while you're at it, who the hell are you and how the fuck did I get here?" The stranger did not answer immediately. Once the room was completely settled, he turned to Sid. Hey, Silent Pain. How much longer am I going to stream for today? Well, we'll finish this chapter, which will probably take maybe 20 minutes. I don't know, probably 20 minutes. And then I will get settled into streaming something. I have a few things on my mind. I don't know. We'll see what we do. The man was almost entirely covered by his red cloak, face and all, giving him a distant, haunting feeling. His hair was wild and dark, as if a comb had never touched it, and his eyes burned. With what, Sid wasn't sure. Pain, anger, perhaps. Sid could understand anger. "I am Vincent Valentine," the man offered, and Sid snorted. "A name to match the outfit. In that case, call me Van Helsing and we'll all fit in with the fucked up monster laboratory here." Sid gestured violently to the sick walls. Vincent paid him little mind. Your name is Sid Highwind. The blonde's eyes widened, then narrowed. How the hell? The man's hand left his cape, and Sid saw his wallet being tossed through the air. He caught it. I suggest you wait here until the shadows pass. Then you should leave immediately. Vincent muttered before turning away. Leave? Sid sputtered. I can't fucking leave. And I asked you what the hell's going on here. The man's face was turning slightly red. The less you know, the better off you will be, I assure you. The silk tone promised. You won't survive long here if you don't leave soon. I'm not leaving, and neither are you till you tell me what I need to know. To back it up, Sid crossed the room in quick strides and grabbed the other man by the cowl. Tell me what the fucking hell this sick place is. Hello, Levi. Sorry to be so confusing. You have jumped in at a slightly confusing moment, but we're in Silent Hill with Final Fantasy characters. Vincent Valentine was not so easily pushed around. Why do you insist on knowing? He began. What drives you to stay? An image appeared in the captain's mind. He heard a far-off voice. Sid muttered. In a moment, his eyes narrowed again, and the brief emotional weakness he'd shown disappeared. Doesn't matter. Just tell me what I need to know. Tell me why. Vincent drove a stiff bargain. Sid tried staring him down, eyes flaring, but Vincent held his gaze. Finally, Sid sighed. Look, I can't leave until I find Shara. I won't leave until I find her. She'd never survive this, not on her own. He had to save her. He had to. Shara? Sid turned to see a quizzical look in the man's eyes. They were the only features on his face that betrayed emotion. A friend. The mechanic grew slightly flustered, and when he became flustered, he grew irritated. Alright, I fucking told you. Now what's the deal with this shit? Vincent's eyes grew darker then. He turned away, his hair hiding his angular face. Sid watched him clench his fists. One of them was covered by a golden claw. Finally, Vincent looked back to Sid. In simple terms, it is my mistake. My punishment for failing. This darkness seeps from the pain and hate of the one I could not save. It engulfs all, tormenting those who wander within, inflicting on others the same pain he once felt. It is my sin, my guilt, my punishment. So Vincent is definitely taking on the role of Dahlia in the movie. Like, this whole thing has a lot of the movie's feelings. Like, Tifa and Shalua are kind of the husband and the detective, and then Cloud is in the town, and this bit where Vincent's staying on purpose and blames himself for not saving the kid. Oh, very obviously pulled from the film. That was morbid. Sid frowned a little, unsure of what to say. It hadn't really been an explanation at all, but after that brief monologue, Sid was nervous about asking anything else. The look on Vincent's face was as if he was in physical pain. Sid kind of felt sorry for him. Oh, well. He scratched the back of his neck, unsure of what to say. Finally, he sighed and dropped his arm. Thanks for saving me from the beast back there and fixing me up. His wounds were indeed bandaged, he'd recently noticed. Wish you luck with the, sin thing. Sid approached the door and Vincent's head shot back up. Where are you going? The blonde nodded towards the hall. I'm going out there. I can't wait. Shara could be there now. He turned to go, only stopping again when Vincent asked a question. This Shara, his eyes were soft, voice low. Who was she to you? To me? Sid asked. In fact, he sometimes wondered that himself. What was Shara to him? I care about her. Vincent met his eyes, seeming to search them for something. Sid squirmed under his gaze. Finally, Vincent nodded and approached. You'll never survive out there on your own, he said, unlocking the door. You'll need me. I'm as dangerous a monster as any that wander these halls. That sounded ominous, but at this point, Sid thought it would be nice to have somebody, monster or no, on his side. I will help you find your Shara. Vincent turned, his fiery gaze locking on him. Then you must leave. No problem there, Sid assured him, arms up in defeat. The two turned towards the dark hall as the door opened. It was long, shadow-filled, echoing with distant crying. Sid felt sweat bead on his forehead, but he clutched his fists. Ready, Vince? The mechanic asked, taking the first step forward. The man beside him seemed surprised, following after. My name is Vincent. As he walked on, Sid didn't really care what his name was, as long as he wasn't fighting this madness alone. Oh, they're very fun. Okay. Tifa's the husband, and is Cloud the wife and Aerith the child? It kind of works out that way, doesn't it? Alright. In a place... Wait, where was I? Oh, here we go. It was as if the whole layout of the mansion had vanished. Some paths he'd used earlier were blocked off by sheets of rusted metal. Other areas were impassable due to the floor collapsing, leaving gaping holes in its wake. Cloud kept a wary eye out, wandering the halls carefully, avoiding the ones made full of eerie noises or too quiet. So he avoided too much sound and too little sound? Okay. His sojourn eventually led him back to a place he'd been before, the surgery room. In a place full of horrors, entering a room that had seen such blood and death did not seem like a good idea. But Cloud knew he could leave no room unchecked, and though he'd seen it once, now that the mansion had changed, he had to see it again. The door moaned as he gently pushed it open, the light of the materia floating through. Water was trickling in the room, though when Cloud got a better look, he saw it was truly blood. Lots of it. The same blood he'd tripped in earlier. It now coated the whole floor, cascading over the grated walls. Feet splashing on the floor, Cloud lifted the light. It danced across the surgery table, which had become a monstrosity. At the sight of it, Cloud stepped back, arm over his mouth to keep from losing his stomach. He's gonna lose it. It's gonna come out of him, I guess. Coughing, he forced himself to look back. The table was covered in steel cords, which strapped a body down to it, so deformed and destroyed it was impossible to tell its age, race, or gender. Okay. Needles were jabbed into its skin in dozens of places, and blood oozed from gaping wounds. Inch-long nails were jabbed into its stomach, keeping the skin folded back as if a grotesque surgery was about to begin. Blood-soaked bandages covered its face, bound its eyes, and kept its mouth shut. Behind, on the far wall, a message was written in grime and congealed blood. If you can't hear him scream, how can you save him? Very much taken from the bathroom scene in the film. A shudder shook his spine, an occurrence that was becoming quite frequent. Cloud followed the arrow to the bound mouth of the body. Sweat-coated fingers moved towards it. The thing shuddered and moaned. Cloud froze. Heart hardening, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the scalpel he'd found earlier. The rusted blade glimmered a sickly brown beneath the light. Cloud steadied his hand and placed the blade on the bandages. The thing began crying out, sobbing even. But he didn't hesitate. With a swift, I said shift, but it was meant to be swift. With a swift thrust, he pushed the blade down, the creature gurgling and struggling in its confinement, then pulled the scalpel towards him, ripping the tape. When he lifted the blade, the thing screeched. Stunned, Cloud dropped the scalpel, which was swept away by the torrent of blood to join the lost key down the drain. Preoccupied by the creature, Cloud didn't notice, too busy staring at the digits carved into the thrashing tongue. 5997. He left, shutting the screaming out by closing the door. More numbers, along with the ones he'd seen painted on the wall. 36105997. An 8-digit code. What was it for? Then it hit him. The safe, Cloud whispered, realization dawning in his eyes. An image of the black box in the attic came to him. He had to get back to it. Yet the floor plan was no longer the same. How to get there? All around came guttural groans and the kinds of noises from things that go bump in the night, out in the tepid darkness that robbed one of their senses, their sight. That rhymed. Good job. Cloud kept his cool. He was a soldier. Whatever this was, he could defeat it. He would complete his mission. He would find Aerith and Zack and go home, or die trying. As he searched desperately for a way to the attic, Cloud came across more mutations, each one more blood-curdling than the last. Things that dragged their prone bodies across the floor, malformed and crying out in agony. Stumbling behemoth with deranged faces that lacked eyes and swung their monstrous limbs, smashing at random. Cloud turned a corner, materia still in hand, pressed tight to the wall. His chest heaved as he timidly glanced around the hall. He saw another creature, a twisted, armless thing, and grimaced. It was one of the acid-spitting ones, which he had to avoid or get painfully scarred. Another hall it was. He turned away and quietly stalked into the darkness, feet echoing on grated, tarnished floors. Hands rubbed raw from hitting the monstrous skin of beasts. Cloud winced as he set his palm on a black doorknob. It opened when he turned. The room within had once been a bedroom, though now it was tainted by madness, the TV giving off a continuous snow scene. Snow meaning static, I'm assuming. The sound bothered Cloud, but try as he might, it wouldn't stop. Groaning, the man leaned forward and pulled out the plug. The blonde felt his heart race a bit when the sound kept going. Still, it didn't really surprise him. Place is full of creepy shit. Muttering, Cloud stood. His frustration burned him and he kicked the machine. It skipped for a moment. An odd thing happened next. Something appeared in the static. Blurry shapes, distant sounds in the constant grind of noise. Cloud leaned closer. Was that a voice? He thought he could see people standing together. It hurt his head looking at it. Please, I'll keep it. Don't want... Sure enough, there was a thin shape in the static. Cloud leaned over ever further, eyes narrowed, barely able to make out the form of someone leaning forward, head in their hands. How can it? First degree. Lacerations. As soon as it came, the vague image and sound was gone, leaving Cloud with a massive migraine. The man grumbled darkly, exploring the room a bit more before moving to the open window. He couldn't see past the fog. It was too thick to look into the distance. But when he glanced up, he saw another open window 2 floors above. This is the room with the light I saw before, the man muttered, watching the light stream from above. Wait! Suddenly, a shadow appeared in the light. With a gasp, Cloud watched a young girl stick her head out the window. Aerith! He shouted. The head turned. But a moment later, the form disappeared and the light with it. Wait! Aerith! Fist slammed against the window sill. Damn it! Cloud grimaced. Spinning from the window angrily, he stormed towards the door. Thunk. By instinct, he jumped into a battle stance. All it was, though, was a rope hitting the window, falling from the floor above. Cloud's eyes widened. Returning to the window, he glanced up. No one there. He tugged on the rope. Let me see what my next image is. Oh, yeah, that's not. No one there. He tugged on the rope and it held firm. Well, not as if it's safer down here. The man climbed onto the sill and carefully turned, rappelling up the grungy wall. The stairwell he expected to see was no longer there when he climbed up. Instead, Cloud found himself in a long hall, walls altered from their usual wood to metallic fences, stained and blood-crusted. The floor was grated again, and Cloud could see darkness in every direction. He could not turn, only walk forward to the one door in the hall, the atrociously destroyed and half-rotten attic door, still at the top of a short set of metal stairs. The bridge creaked and groaned as Cloud crossed it. Moving as if his joints refused to bend, Cloud stiffly approached the door. His heightened senses were on overdrive. Was that something in the corner of his eyes, something red moving below? Did he hear distant crying, echoing sadness? His mouth tasted of copper. He was eager to leave the twisted hall. Cloud thrust the attic door open and rushed in, slamming it behind him. Somehow, the room looked the same. Unlike everywhere else, little had changed. There was less light. The darkness seemed thicker, congealed. Nerves tickled his spine, and Cloud kept his guard up. Every step he took felt like a move against fate. His eyes constantly scanned the darkness, but it seemed as if nothing was there. He hurried to stay safe. Kneeling, he entered the code as quickly as he could, ready to be free of the place. The first time, his shivering fingers moved too fast, and with a curse he had to start again. Sweat was pouring down his skin. Oh, well, thank you, Silent Pain. I would tend to agree that this story is the most improved of the ones we've read so far, but I believe that is because most of what we've read that I've written was from middle school or elementary school, and this is from high school, so clearly I had started to improve. There's still some obvious problems, but it's not really writing. I think it's more of just general knowledge. You know, not having a grasp of certain things, not editing, you know. Why is Kagome there? Because every fan fiction from the 2000s had Kagome in it. You don't believe me? Google it. She was in everything. She was in every crossover ever. So it amused me to put her in there. She's not in the story. This is not that kind of story. But I needed 3 people for a battle team. Yeah. I don't know why it is. I feel like it's probably because she's one of the best, like, female main characters in an anime that people could identify with. You know, like, she was actually really well written, and the story was really good to her, rather than half of anime that the women were treated really poorly, and anyway. So everybody used her as their self-insert OC, and she was put in all the things. It's hilarious. Have I got any tips when dealing with dialogue with writing stories? Listen to people. That is the biggest thing, I think. Because a lot of folks, I think, write dialogue with the intent of trying to, you know, you're trying to share information, move your story forward, without considering how people actually talk. Because people don't always talk in a way that makes sense. They don't always talk clearly. They don't always talk grammatically correct. The way that people talk and the way that people write dialogue are often incredibly different. And just listening to people converse out in public or in a film, well, maybe not a film because that's written, maybe something like a YouTube video, you know, listening to dialogue between friends in a relaxed setting, like, that kind of thing can help you realize some of the nuance between writing a believable scene of dialogue that kind of feels more real, rather than, you know, something that's less natural and more stilted. I read professionally written novels all the time that I'm like, people don't talk like this. They just don't. But dialogue's tough. It is definitely very tough. That is what I would recommend. Here we go. The second time he succeeded, heart leaping in his chest. Yes! Cloud wrenched the safe door open with a creak, leaning down to look inside. Within resembled a cage, rotten and turned brown, and every cell in Cloud's body told him not to reach in. Still he had to. There was a large white envelope, safe from the destruction surrounding it, and whatever it was, he needed it. In he reached and grabbed it swiftly. His hand came out safe and sound, envelope in his grasp. Trembling fingers tore the top off. Cloud was frightened, yes, but he was curious and desperate to know if something inside the package would save him. Would it show him the way out? Lead him to Zack and Aerith? He turned the envelope and dumped it over. First, something heavy and clunky hit the floor with a thunk. A few more shakes and a couple of documents fell out. Cloud took hold of them. They were health reports of some kind, written in technical jargon Cloud hardly understood. 3 of them stapled together, all about one person. The weird thing was, they were covered by some liquid, not blood or sweat, but a thick green. The same stuff in that vial with Zack's letter, Cloud realized with a gasp. He reached into his pocket. With a frown, he realized he probably lost the letter and the vial during the plane crash. Determined, Cloud examined the documents a little more. The name of the patient at the top was crossed out violently in black ink. Beneath it, someone had written just as violently, "Not my name, give it back." Frowning, Cloud folded up the slightly wet papers and tucked them back in the envelope. He turned his attention to the bulky thing that had fallen out. It was another materia, like the fire currently in Cloud's free hand. But this was different, odd, unlike any Cloud had ever seen. It was dark, black. In this light, Cloud couldn't tell, but there was something off about it. Just as he went to touch it, there was a growl. The man leapt to his feet, swinging his head round. Another growl raced through the attic as Cloud hoisted his fire materia and poured magic into it. The light grew and grew, fighting back the darkness. Dread poured through the blonde's mind. He almost wanted the darkness to stay, to keep him from seeing whatever atrocious monster was after him. It was 2-headed, purple and red, covered in fur, which was soaked in blood and grime. With teeth bared, the thing moved its heavy legs toward him, footsteps thundering as Cloud attempted to back up. Those who've played Final Fantasy VII will recognize that I have combined Silent Hill gameplay with Final Fantasy's story, where in Final Fantasy VII in the mansion, you have to go through the mansion, find some things, open a safe, and fight a monster, and that's the monster. And that's the side quest that lets you get Vincent. So I turned that into a Silent Hill quest. Heart hammering, eyes glancing all around, he tried to find an answer, a way out, and saw none. Fists tightening, Cloud shook his head violently. It couldn't end here. Slobber fell from the beast's mouths, acting as acid as it hit the floor. Cloud's back hit the wall, breath coming in sharp, choking gasps. There was nothing else to do. With no way out, Cloud lifted his hand that held the materia. Wait! The fire materia had been replaced. Somehow the unusual black materia had appeared in his hand. Cloud lifted it and screamed, pouring his magic into it in desperate hope that something would happen, anything to keep him alive. It couldn't end here. Not here. Alright, now there's some italics. We're going to be jumping back and forth between memories in his head and the scene, so I will try and specify when we have italics. It can't end here. No, you can't die. Sobbing, the teen clutched his mother tightly as fire licked them from all sides. The tears dried up almost as quick as they came as they were surrounded by flames. This was it. This was the end. Lifting his red eyes, Cloud let out a wrenching, shrill scream. His eyes, I guess I meant, again, red from crying. He doesn't have red eyes. Alright, italics are over. No! Something poured out of the black materia like light would, blinding all. But this was not light. It was not bright at all. It was pitch, empty, darkness. Whatever it was, it flew from the materia in his hand and engulfed the creature before him. The two-headed beast gave out twin cries of agony as Cloud squeezed his eyes shut and slid to the floor. He stayed still as he heard the body hit the ground, letting out its final gurgling screams. Then it was gone. Cloud wheezed, legs going limp. His hand fell, finger loosening, and the materia fell out of his grasp. The man collapsed against the base of the wall, head falling back. Like a doll, his limbs became soft and he stopped moving, but for the heavy rise and fall of his chest. Exhausted. Cloud was beyond exhausted. He closed his eyes and stopped worrying about the surrounding world. It was perhaps not the smartest thing to do, but the man began to sleep. Half asleep, drifting between dreams and reality, both of which were dismal and haunting. In his dreams, he was a boy, with eyes clouded by pain. In reality, he was the same, but no longer innocent. Alright, some italics. What are you gonna do when we get to Midgar? A distant voice whispered. Somewhere in the far reaches of his mind, a young man was smiling, but Cloud could hardly see his face. His laugh was infectious, his happiness overwhelming. No more italics. Pit-pat, pit-pat. Footsteps broke the silence. Part of his mind awakened, recognizing, "Wake up! Danger!" But his sleep was too heavy. A moment later, and he could see feet as someone stood in front of him. The edges of a pink dress came into his sight. At least, in his sleep, he thought it was pink. He heard a familiar, airy tone. "What are you doing here?" Aerith asked softly, a slight laugh in her tone. "This is hardly safe for you. In the midst of rest, you might find yourself whisked away, never to awaken." Alright, now we're in italics again. Strife. This was a different man, with a stronger, deeper tone. It commanded respect, and he did respect him. The tall man with an angular face and confident smirk turned to face him. "Do you remember what I told you?" Did he remember? What should he remember? No more italics. "You aren't even halfway yet. You struggle." This didn't sound like the way Aerith talked. The voice. "Must I hand you everything?" No, this wasn't her angelic voice at all. Who was this? The blurry, distant image of a girl in a pink dress fluttered, but Cloud couldn't see who was really there. Italics again. Cloud. The tall man turned fully towards him, imposing figure towering above. The smirk became a smile. The image blurred, the voice harder to hear. "You're my..." No more italics. More footsteps. The stranger approached and whispered in his ear, "Go home, Cloud Strife. Go home." Cloud awoke to a safer world. Not safe entirely, no. He was still in the hell of his hometown, but the dark place, the other world, was gone. The mansion was back to normal again. Groaning, Cloud tried to remember what had happened after the monster attacked, but he couldn't remember it all. His fire materia was gone, and so were the documents he found. What had happened? The man glanced around. It was a creepy, dusty attic now. His eyes caught sight of something that shone on the floor. Crossing the room, he knelt by it. It was a picture. Cloud scrutinized it. Had it come out of the envelope too, or had someone put it there? He wasn't sure. It didn't look important at all. It was just a photograph of snow. A pure field of untouched snow. Why would someone take a picture of that? As he looked and stared, eyes narrowing, Cloud felt his head pound. He groaned in anguish, clutching his forehead, and a memory returned to him. Go home, Cloud Strife. Home? But he couldn't leave now. He had to find Zack and Aerith. He had to solve this mystery. His friends were here somewhere, and he'd find them, and then they'd all go home. The blonde kept brewing on... Brewing? Kept brewing on the word... I guess I meant brooding, but I wrote brewing. The blonde kept brooding on the words, repeating them over and over. Go home, Cloud Strife. Go home. He leapt to his feet. Realization dawned, and he clutched the photo tightly, rushing out of the attic, down the hall and away. He knew where to go. He knew exactly where. The house on the left of the square, 104 Nebel Road, with the yellow paint. Home. And that's the end of that chapter, and we are finished for today. Took about exactly an hour and a half. I did a good guess. Thank you for joining me in more of our fictional Silent Hill struggles for poor Cloud and Sid having such a horrible time. Yeah, this was pretty fun. I'm enjoying the writing here. It's goofy a little bit, and definitely could have been... It needed edited. It needed a second pair of eyes to look at it and check it over, but for a teenager writing horror for the first time, I'm actually more impressed than I thought I would be. Definitely not as bad as I remember thinking it was when I was younger. But thank you for joining me. We will be back next week with the next portion, chapters 6 and 7, and then the week after will be 8 and 9, and then we'll be done. This story only has 9 chapters, so it does not end on a finished note, but I will try and remember, go back to what I was trying to write with this story and finish something, you know, give it a little bit of a bookend. I will be streaming, excuse me, I will be streaming something in just a bit. Maybe 7:30-ish, and tomorrow I'm not entirely certain. It depends, but I will let y'all know. Follow me on social media and join the Discord if you want to keep more up to date with general updates and such. Support the channel on Patreon or PayPal or on YouTube membership if you can. It's a big help. And I will be back in just a bit with another stream. Thanks again, guys. Bye.